Derek, it is great to see you as always, my friend. You called a wonderful, once again, had a wonderful broadcast last night, you and Casey. And then the heartbreaker came in the final 5 seconds. Carolina falls 70-69, and it has been just a roller coaster of frustrations over the last couple of weeks for this basketball team. But give us your synopsis of what you saw last night. The last time the Gators were here, they fell. I thought it was going to happen again, but it did not.
You know, the irony is last year we beat them in a game that they probably deserved to win. They blew a lead. They lost momentum based on a simple defensive change. South Carolina went to the 1-3-1 zone, and Florida had not prepared for it, and they imploded. And the Gamecocks won the game late. And last night, it was the basically changing of roles. South Carolina led the whole game, dominated a good portion of it, really did. I mean, we're the better team. And then with just under 8 minutes left, up 13, they go to a full court press, and South Carolina just did not handle it well at all and gave the game away. And there's just no other way to describe that contest other than that one was given away. And so you've got 3 losses now in your last 4 games that have all been one possession games, that have all been games where South Carolina had a shot at the buzzer to tie or win. And that's tough. That's tough to just keep playing that scenario back over and over again without getting a reward somewhere in there to keep the motivation high, to keep guys encouraged. Going to be real interesting to see how this bunch responds on Saturday. It's another really difficult test, another ranked opponent. You just wonder how resilient are the young people. We always hear they're so much more resilient than the old farts. We're going to find out Saturday because that was a absolute gut punch last night.
It was. And Derek, and we're going to talk about some specifics in the ball game and certainly some specific players here in just a minute. But this is how tight this whole thing is. And I know that, those that are, just kind of done with this whole thing on the negative side of it, they're not going to want to hear it. But this is the exact reality of the situation right now. Carolina is 10-9, and they're 0-6 in league play for the first time since the 13-14 season. Mm-hmm. All right. 7 more points in those 3 games, they would be 13-6, 3-3 in league play, with a pair of top 5 wins and another one on the road at Vanderbilt, who today would be in the tournament. And South Carolina would be knocking on the door of the NCAA tournament right now with that record because of who they beat to get there. I'm not saying they'd be in or anything. Right. I'm not trying to blow smoke. I'm just saying you would be having a conversation about, okay, you keep things moving here and look what we've got. But 7 points removed from that is the reality of where they are right now. And I just find that just fascinating. I mean, this league is so unforgiving right now, and you're seeing just how close it can be with all these teams.
First off, you're absolutely right, and it's a thought that's gone through my mind many times. Sometimes you lose a close game, and you can come up with your ifs and buts on how it could have gone differently. But it's rare that it is as simple as it has been in these 3 contests. You talk about 7 more points. I think about it in terms of 5 fewer turnovers. Yeah. The number of possessions that have just been given away. You look up last night, Collin had a great game, but he only took 9 shots. And I guess in the postgame press conference, some folks were asking him about that. And he said, I'm a pass first guy. And he had, 8 assists. He was tremendous. But I don't even think about it in terms of him turning down shots. I think about it in terms of South Carolina turning down possessions. Yeah. The number of possessions where the ball didn't make it to midcourt, where you never got into your offense, which meant Collin didn't get to make the decision about whether to score or pass, which he was so good at last night in terms of getting his own and setting up other guys. And that's also on all of those possessions. Those are, moments where the clock doesn't go, 20 seconds plus off on a normal possession. It ends in 5 seconds or less with a turnover and an easy bucket. And Florida, which was not, really good in the half court last night, gets to avoid playing in the half court last night. Those are the things. It just, the turnovers are just so big of a plague for this team. And it is, you just watched, believe me, when I walked into shoot around yesterday and saw Jamarii participating, can't happen soon enough. And it's not all about, just him or just replacing, getting a point guard in there. But boy, it just, when you saw it, crystallized last night, those last 8 minutes where the struggles by the perimeter guys just to get the ball across midcourt and get into offense, that's where it's really tough. And you just realize guys are being asked to do things that they are just not comfortable with right now. And, when you can see sometimes someone who doesn't want the ball in a certain situation, as opposed to saying, give me the ball, I'll take care of this. And that's, you just hate to see it. It's not fun for anybody to watch.
No, it's not. And it's, and those turnovers you're talking about too, Derek, like last night, 15, certainly not 25, but you're never happy with 15, but it's that moment where it's okay, you turned it over. Oh my God, we just turned it over again. Oh my gosh, they just turned it over again. And there's nobody there to stop it. Like it just keeps going, and it's befuddling. You're talking about a 13-point lead that all of a sudden is like 7 within a matter of 30 seconds of real time. I'm not talking about clock time. I'm talking about like in life. Yeah. And and I think at the end of the day, that's Zach Davis, for instance. Offensively, the shot making and the selection and the creativity and the things that he was doing last night, that's what Zach Davis, I think a lot of us thought we'd see more consistently. But then you're asking him to also handle the basketball. He's always been pretty good defensively for the most part, but handle the basketball, it's just not him. I mean, he turned it over 6 times,
I hear you, but Frank Martin recruited him as a point guard, man.
Yeah.
It's not asking him to do things that are unreasonable. And he's got 15 turnovers in the last 3 games.
Right.
And that's just got to be cleaned up. And that's so much of that is just decision-making for him. Mm-hmm. A lot of his mistakes are just, man, you can't throw that pocket pass there. Man, you can't try and dribble between those 2 defenders. You can't throw the ball on the sideline where the best case scenario is a catch by someone who's now dangling over the sideline themselves trying to stay in bounds. That's decision-making. There's some of it, yes. Some of it is guys who are having to do things they're not comfortable with. Others are guys who are just not handling their opportunities well. And yeah, I mean, 22 last night, he was electric at times, but he also took 10 threes. And I don't think that's at all what is best for this team. And then like we just said, 15 turnovers in 3 games. He's got to clean this up. He's a junior now. He's a vitally important part of this team, and they need him to be better in those circumstances.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say, and I agree with it. If this is the role, like you mentioned that Frank recruited him to play point, if he had been playing point, I certainly think that this wouldn't be the issue that it is. But he's been kind of thrown in there, and he's capable, but it just hasn't worked out. But I'm not trying to pin this on Zach. No. Zach Davis ain't the only one turning the basketball over. Right. I mean, we're talking about all kinds of. You're talking about a guy like Nick Pringle and all the ability, and half the time the ball lands in his hands. I'm not being personal with these guys. I'm just saying the ball gets in his hands, and half the time he gets slapped out and ends up on the other side of the baseline. And Lamont mentioned that last night. We have not been strong with the basketball. I don't even know what you do to continue to work on that. I would think by now it's you either are or you aren't.
Well, I mean, I think some of that too is you don't think about in practice. I mean, Lamont doesn't teach defense like that. And some of these teams are going to see it again Saturday at Mississippi State. Overly aggressive and just raking across arms with the expectation that officials are going to let it go because they don't want to stop the game over and over and over and over. And that's, I thought South Carolina in that SEC opener looked overwhelmed by it because in non-conference, you don't see that. Then you get into league play, and right now this league's kind of loaded with teams that play like that. And so it has been a matter of having to adapt. But again, it comes down to when are you able to prepare for it other than games? Because We don't defend like that. We don't teach defense like that. We defend with our body and moving and being positionally correct. And if that's the way it's going to be, then they only are exposed to it, twice a week at most in games. And it's hard to adapt. I would imagine, at least. I would imagine it's hard to adapt to that when you're not seeing that every day in practice. And that's exactly the way some of these teams are playing now. And Mississippi State's the top of that list. So you better be prepared for it again on Saturday, because they're going to come in here with that mindset to just dig, especially when you look back at the first game and see the success they had in doing that to South Carolina. You've got to be tough with the basketball, strong with the basketball, and be prepared for guys to come at you like that. Again, last night, what did we have? 21 fouls called over the whole game.
Total, yeah.
That's a physical game to imagine that's possible. And then you get home and flip on the end of the Georgia-Arkansas game, and they were like double that. And people are complaining about too many fouls being called there. On some level, officials are put in an unwinnable situation when, the complaints are, well, you're letting too much go. Well, over here, they're dragging this game into a 3-hour game. What's the correct answer? I don't know that there is one. But the game has been allowed to become that. I was thinking about this the other day, and this is an grumpy old man opinion. So if you don't want to hear it, alert. Just turn off your.
I don't have any choice. I have to hear it.
Is there another sport, though? Really? Is there another sport? And if there is, if you think there's one, if football's this way you think, let me know. But in my mind, basketball is the sport, college basketball, where the rule book has largely been abandoned. The things that are written in the rule book are not in any way policed the way they say they are. Think about over the years, the evolution of traveling calls and what you're allowed to do now versus what you're allowed to do 10 years ago. And then go further, if you're old enough, go further, 20 years ago. Think about the extra steps guys take, that now you just have to accept the fact that that's okay. That's considered okay. But it's considered okay even though the rule book was never modified to make it okay. And then you get into all the contact of how the game is played, and the catches you make where guys are shoving you as you make the catch. And Collin, felt like you got knocked out of bounds on one turnover he had, and his point was, I didn't make the catch because I got a two-hand shove in the back. And it's not to say, hey, poor us. It's across the board. It's just, to me, it is kind of amazing to look at how the game is officiated and go, how do you get there? Where's the documentation that officials are given to say, okay, I know what this NCAA rulebook says, but we're not calling that. That's not how this game is officiated now. We want to keep the game moving right up until the time that we see the need for an instant replay review, and then we're going to stop it for 4 minutes. It's just a bizarre game to me now. And again, I know this is just old man grumpy, I guess, but I'm amazed by what the game is versus what the rule book says it is, and how far afield we've gotten of that without ever going back in. Like the NFL, I know they change the rules. They go in and say, okay, well, we've got to really address this situation of, did he have the catch? Did he hold it long enough? Did he, make a football move? They add all that language. I don't know that college basketball's added any language. They've just continued to change the way they call the game. And at times it's perplexing to figure out, as from an outsider, which we're all outsiders if we're not referees, what the belief system is kind of based on. And that's where I get back to the way you say be strong on the ball. You have to be, because it's hand-to-hand combat out there, man. It really is.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't think that was the old man description that you gave us, because I don't understand it either. Well, football's a whole new story. What is a catch? What is not a catch? What is targeting? What isn't targeting? They've screwed all that up for years.
But that's all been added to the rule book.
But it's been added. Yeah. You're talking about the gray area of, well, the rule says you actually can't catch the basketball and take 6 steps to get yourself set, but you're doing it and nobody says, or, carrying the basketball while you take 4 steps down the court.
It used to be if you gained an advantage, that's when it supposedly should be called. It's like, okay, don't call that if nobody got an edge from doing it. I get that. But now, I mean, if a ball carrier, listen to me, if a ball handler is getting downhill and he's got that ball on top of his hand, and that's how he gets around his primary defender, well, I think the advantage has been gained. It is a strange game to try and explain to people if you were to say, well, here's the way you were taught the game, but here's how it's played now. And for modern players, they may not see it that way because this may be all they know. It's just, again, old heads. It's amazing to me how different the game is now than it was, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I'm sure Casey just gets a good chuckle out of this thinking about his teams and how the game was played back then too.
Well, they used to have to dribble it straight up and down like this with,
Right.
the short shorts have you seen the skit from Saturday Night Live with Nate Bargatze
Yes,
when he was George Washington?
Yes.
Football, sir, it's a game you play with your hands.
Yes.
When you score, how many points is it, sir? Sometimes one, sometimes three.
Columbia? Is he coming to Columbia anytime soon?
I don't know.
I got to check that out.
He might be. That's football, sir. Well, Derek, it's you made this point a little while ago, and if you're Coach Paris right now, I would think that the message is okay. So moving forward here, we've got two avenues, and it's a pretty wide gap between the two. One, you can go down as one of the worst teams in program history if you just want to throw in the towel and let's just ease on out. And that's not his personality, as we all well know. Or you could get this thing turned around and show everybody how tough you are, probably ruin some seasons down the stretch if you can pick up some big wins and put yourself in a position to have a conversation at least somewhere, whether it's the March Madness, whether it's the NIT, whether you're playing your best basketball in March as you enter SEC tournament play and you're able to wiggle your way through that and see what happens. And then after that, it's up to the players, Derek. They got to go out and do what they got to do. And as you pointed out, getting healthy would certainly help with this. And we'll see how quickly they can get Jamarii Tomas back in there. Maybe by the weekend, who knows? But however that message is received, from an effort standpoint, win or lose this weekend and moving forward, like I look at this team like I looked at Missouri last year. I felt like Missouri, someone popped their balloon and they just kind of eased on through. I don't think that that's this team, but I'll be anxious to watch them down the stretch and see what they look like.
Well, and to your point, I mentioned this the other day to someone, that Missouri team, when we played them early in conference play, I think it was game 3 or game 4, we needed a buzzer beater to beat them. Jacoby Wright hit a shot to basically get us out of there. And then they were beaten up, and then the injuries continued to mount. They didn't get guys back. They kept losing more guys. And then by the last month of the season, man, they were dead man walking. They weren't terribly competitive night to night. And that's what you're trying to avoid. It's been a tough go. You're coming off of an NCAA tournament season that was a storybook season, same scenario they had. You lost the main pieces to that team. And then the guys you were counting on the next year, you're losing them to injury. And suddenly you don't have the unit. Not only the unit you had the last year that was so successful, but you don't have the unit you thought you were going to have this year. And how do you manage that? How do you sustain and keep guys' heads up and keep them all connected? And that's going to be on this coaching staff. That is a big-time challenge right now because, again, where do you find that chance to catch your breath? It doesn't exist in this league this year. It is a brutal schedule, and not to mention of the teams that on paper are most gettable, South Carolina only gets, I think, one home game. If you were to block up those 4 teams along with the Gamecocks there around the bottom of the league, you only get one of them at Colonial Life Arena. When you see how competitive this bunch has been at home against the national powers that are Florida and Auburn, you realize the difference that being at home can make against those teams. Vanderbilt, I say, they're great run they're on, but they're still closer to South Carolina's end of the standings right now in my mind, even if on paper they're not. Well, you saw, even with 25 turnovers, had a chance to beat them in their building. Some teams you can go get in their building, but how much different would that game look at home? But you don't get them at home. There's those teams that are down there with that end of things. You're only getting one of them at home. I think it's Arkansas at the end of the year. Yeah, that's it. Yep. That's it. You don't get LSU at home. You don't get, Missouri at home, if you even want to put Missouri in that category. You don't get Oklahoma at home. So those are the tough circumstances. It has been a devil of a schedule, and it's just going to continue to be one. So it's really, really on these guys, coaches and players, to figure out a way to get it where you need it, get your confidence back up, find a way to finish, to get that last 2 minutes of the game to go your way, as opposed to what we've seen here these last 2 weeks where they've just come up one play short. And if you need any solace in if misery loves company is one of those things that you believe in, I sent a text out this morning to Scott Howard and David over at Ole Miss, the play-by-play guys for those two programs. Georgia, Ole Miss, and South Carolina led for 119 minutes and 14 seconds of 120 minutes of game time combined last night. They went 0-3.
Oh,
so there were plenty of craziness around the league last night. Unfortunately for us, it was Groundhog Day, and we were in the middle of it again. So.
Wow, what a stat. Hey, it was a wild night in the league. There's no question about that. But I didn't realize that's a I'll remember that. I'm going to regurgitate that a little bit later on. So thanks for the tip.
You got it.
That's crazy. That is crazy. There you go. In the handy dandy Nana's porch, which has the best pimento cheese on the face of the planet. Chat box over here. Craig said that Nate Bargatze comes to the CLA August the 14th.
There we go. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's a can't misser right there.
That's a can't misser. There's no doubt about that. That's just 2 weeks before Carolina football kicks. That's a good time to get in there.
And speaking of can't miss, if you'd like to hear the perspective of someone whose opinion really matters, I'll be with Lamont Paris from 6 to 7 tonight for Carolina calls. So tune into the Gamecocks Sports Network and kind of get the real skinny from the man that is running this thing.
I know we got to get you out of here in just a second, and I know you have not dove all the way into Carolina baseball yet, and we'll get to that more in the coming weeks. Coach Lake is on with us tomorrow morning, and
awesome.
at 11 tomorrow, I believe, is when Ashley meets with the media and Paul, maybe, or vice versa.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
We've got Ashley, then lunch, then Paul, then players.
And then Paul. Okay. Yeah. But it's drawing closer, Derek, and they open practice tomorrow as well. Yeah, I know you're fired up to see this inaugural season of Coach Maneri.
Absolutely. I was over in his office last week and just trying to figure out, good ways and good times to catch up with his staff and stay connected with them, since so many of them are new faces. And I know how excited he was to have those guys back on campus. So yes, indeed, looking forward to watching them grow, figure out who fits what roles, and eventually get ready for Valentine's / opening day.
Yeah, I can't wait to see everything for Coach Tanner that weekend. I'm as excited about that as anything. And I tell Monty this every year, and it's been right. It's been right every year for the history of mankind almost. Oh, it'll be February the 7th. Derek Scott wakes up, walks outside, high of 65. Ooh, baseball season right around the corner. Early spring.
It usually Mother Nature usually seems to cooperate, at least for that one day. Usually you count on her for at least one day of, boy, you couldn't have asked for something better than this. So we're hoping February 14th fits that profile.
And then it's 30 the next morning and snowing. That's the baseball gods. Derek, thank you as always, man. This weekend, it's a 1:00 tip at the CLA if you're headed to the ball game. If you're not, the radio broadcast begins at 12:30 with Derek Scott and Casey Manning on all of your local radio stations. You need to check those, your local listings for the Gamecock Sports Network. If you don't have one, that's what they build the app for. Pull up the app in your phone. You can listen to the call as they try to upend 14th ranked Mississippi State on Saturday afternoon. We'll talk to you sometime next week, brother. Have a wonderful weekend and go get that first win this weekend.
Sounds good. See ya.
Thanks, Derek.